My name is Philip Price, and I was president from 1995 to 1997.
Philip, tell us about how it came to be that you became involved with the Beth Jacob congregation.
In 1982, I was working in Hamilton at the Canadian Centre for Occupational Health and Safety, and unfortunately my father died, and I needed to say Kaddish. And at that time, I was boarding in a house up on Hillcrest. And so Beth Jacob was the closest synagogue to Hillcrest. So I'd come down to Hillcrest and say Kaddish morning and evening. That's how I came to Beth Jacob.
And then after some years as being a member, how did it come about that you came to be on the board?
Well, Morris Smirlik, who was the incoming president in 1984, asked me to join the board. That's how I came to be on the board.
And then after some years on the board, you came on to the executive.
Yes, and you were the one responsible.
And how did you enjoy being on the executive?
Well, let me tell you how we came. Because, it's a long story. There was a succession plan in place. So there was a president, 3 vice presidents, a first, second, and third vice president. And you were the incoming president in 1990, right? And you approached me at the annual general meeting, at the AGM, and asked me to join the executive as the 3rd vice president, which I agreed to do, happily agreed to do.
And so over the course of the years that followed, we had board meetings. There were executive meetings beforehand where we had dinner together.
Yes, I remember we used to have the executive meetings up in the rabbi's office, and we'd always have fried chicken, and it was great.
And then how did you feel about coming on as president? What were your experiences like being president of the shul?
Well, it was a great responsibility, and sometimes I felt nervous. Do you want to know how I became president?
Sure.
The whole process, because you were president from 90 to 92, and in the last year, the second year of your presidency, the first vice president, who was due to become president when you stepped down, unexpectedly resigned. And so the second vice president, who was Bill Schrag, moved up to first vice president, and I, as the 3rd vice president, moved up to 2nd. And then when you stepped down, when Jeff stepped down, Bill became president, and I became the 1st vice president. And Bill served from 92 to 95. Now, the usual custom was that presidents would serve for 2 years, but Bill wanted to serve an extra year because Rabbi Silverman was due to resign, and Bill wanted to work out a retirement package for Rabbi Silverman. So he stayed on an extra year, and then when he stepped down, I became president in 95, 97.
So then you were president at a time when we had the transition.
Yes.
From Rabbi Silverman ultimately to Rabbi Carlin.
Yes. So, yeah, I was president the last year of Rabbi Silverman and the first year of Rabbi Carlin.
Were there particular challenges that you found you had to face during that period of time? Given the fact that we had years of, I'll call it, stability with Rabbi Silverman, there was now a transition that you had to help manage?
Well, first of all, being on the executive and the board, there was always financial problems. And I remember Bill Halpin, who was the treasurer, came up with the idea of imposing a surcharge on everybody's dues to raise money. Now, this wasn't popular, but we did raise a certain amount of money. Now, one of the big challenges of that year was to find a replacement for Rabbi Silverman. And I was on the search committee. Bill Schrag was the head of the search committee, and I was on the search committee as president. And we interviewed a number of candidates, and we chose Gary Carlin as we checked references and so on, and we decided to offer him the position of rabbi.
Are there particular memories that come to mind, in addition to the hiring of Rabbi Carlin, for your period as president, events or activities or any particular memories?
First of all, I want you to go through some of the challenges we had. So as I said, one of the challenges was to find a replacement for Rabbi Silverman. And another challenge was Cantor Berkovicki retired, and we needed to find a cantor for the high holidays. And we interviewed a number of cantors, and we decided to select Cantor Mann, who lived in the U.S. And at that time, Marcia Levy, who was the executive director, her job was to negotiate with him to work out terms of employment and so on. And the one summer, this is a humorous story, the one summer, Maureen and I were on vacation in Philadelphia, and we stayed with Phyllis Koshrick, a friend Phyllis Koshrick, who'd been a member of Beth Jacob. And Marcia would phone me up a number of times on the landline, Phyllis's landline, because there was no cell phones or emails. And when Marcia would phone, Phyllis would answer the phone, and then she'd call me. She'd say, "Your girlfriend is on the phone. I need to speak to you." I must say that Marcia was a great help to me when she was executive director. We worked closely together, and she was a great support, and I owe a lot to her in my time as president.
How did you assist in managing the transition to a new team, having had Rabbi Silverman and Cantor Berkovicki for so many years, to get everybody, we'll call it acclimatized to dealing with the new rabbi, a new cantor, new potential ritual?
Well, part of it was the Poplin rituals. I had to work closely with Rabbi Carlin, and there were sort of problems and so on, which I won't go into because it's like we found it sort of difficult in the way to become the rabbi, and he probably had certain issues and so on. But I was there to help him, and as best as I could for the 1 year.
In terms of any particular memories that come to mind for programming or events, is there anything that you can recall that comes to mind?
Well, the last year Rabbi Silverman was 1995, and I remember we organized a special weekend for him, and we invited his friend and colleague, Rabbi Jules Haller, who was a famous rabbi. He was also a friend of Rabbi Silverman, and he came up here and spoke about Rabbi Silverman and talked about the man and his accomplishments. And I, as president, also gave a speech talking about Rabbi Silverman, what he had accomplished, and so on. And that's a memory. The story with Marcia and Cantor Mann is a memory. And I remember with Rabbi Carlin used to, his custom was to invite congregants to his house for Friday night dinner, different. So they got to meet him, and he got to meet them. And we went, Maureen and I and the children went one Friday night. And Rabbi Carlin was a great rock and roll fan. And he and my sons, my children, spent most of the evening talking about rock and roll bands that they knew. It sort of gave a different aspect, different side of Rabbi Carlin that people might not have known, seeing him in the synagogue.
Now, you've reminded me, Philip, that that weekend for Rabbi Silverman, was that not the first time a woman read from the Torah for a Shabbat service?
We're getting onto that. We're getting onto that. I mean, Rabbi Silverman and I had a history. We got along well together, and Rabbi Silverman used to have Sunday morning studies, breakfast and study sessions, which I attended, and actually one of my jobs was to organize sponsors for the breakfast. And then also Rabbi Silverman, we had a Sunday evening at different people's houses where we studied also. And he was a different man then than he was in the synagogue. He was gracious and welcoming and, you know, warm. He was a different type of, you know, you didn't show that in the synagogue. People thought he was a stern, but he was actually, in some ways, a fun guy.
Certainly we had dinner at his home, and he was extremely social and gregarious.
Yes.
But what I recall, too, was the work he put in on his sermons.
Oh, yes, his sermons were great. I mean, I'm sure we said that he should actually certainly write them up and give them to his children. But he was a different man in a social setting than he was. I don't know if he decided he had to sort of be the stern sort of guy and not this fun guy that he could be.
Now, you've maintained your involvement, of course, actively with the synagogue over the years, even after serving as president, through pulpit and ritual. Can you comment on where the strengths are for Beth Jacob as a synagogue, as you've seen it?
The main accomplishment that we had when I was president was that we progressed towards egalitarianism. Now, one of the mandates when we hired Rabbi Carlin was to move us to egalitarianism, and so then he wrote up a tshuva and used sources, and so we allowed women to get aliyot, to read Torah, and to be gabbai. So that was probably the main accomplishment of my time as president. There was another occasion with Rabbi Silverman, not this weekend, but another occasion where we were honoring him. And I remember with his reluctance to allow women to get aliyot. I mean, there are a couple of stories I could tell you about, but his children all read Torah for him, and he showed a lot of pride in this. He was really proud of his kids for doing that. So there was another side to him. You know, there was this was our pulpit and ritual before I became president, when Andrew Schringer was the Negev Din honoree, and he came to pulpit and ritual and said, "I want to give an aliyah." We said, "How can you do that?" You know, and he said, "It's the custom of Beth Jacob to give a synagogue member who is the Negev Din honoree to give an aliyah." So she got an aliyah. And then later on, when Gloria retired, we gave her an aliyah as well. And this became known as the Silverman law.
And then how do we move to Gloria getting to read the Torah?
Well, that was because with Rabbi Carlin that we then, you know, as I said, we moved to get women get aliyot, read Torah, and be gabbai. That was then. And as I said, and the time later when we honored Rabbi Silverman and his kids read Torah, that was again, we really allowed women to read Torah.
Were there difficulties in getting the congregation to accept those changes, or did that happen fairly smoothly?
I think first of all, Rabbi Carlin used to have study sessions to talk about this, and I don't recall hardly anybody left the synagogue. People accepted that. And you know, earlier, another story was, I mean, Rabbi Silverman, he felt that if you started this process with giving women all these roles, that it would split the synagogue, which it didn't happen. So he was reluctant to do that. One time when Norma was president, and this was a high holiday, and the person who was supposed to come and open the ark didn't come. So we turned to Norma and asked her to open the ark. And we said to him, you know, why did you do that? And he said, well, you know, if the person doesn't come up, then I asked the president to do that. So Norma was actually the first woman to open the ark.
Goodness sakes, that's certainly a story from the past.
Yeah.
Now, Philip, as I was saying, you've continued to be involved through pulpit and ritual-related issues through the synagogue. What kind of changes have you seen over the course of years to take us up to now?
Well, we became, you know, Rabbi Biller completed the process of egalitarianism, you know, having women lead services and being counted in the minyan. So that was a big achievement. We had a number of rabbis that came in afterwards. It was Rabbi Biller and then Rabbi Salzberg, which Wendy and John Levy were instrumental in. And he served for a long time. And then after him was Rabbi Hillel and then Rabbi Benny. So what changes? Well, one of the changes is that we built this chapel. We decided that the sanctuary was too big to have just regular Shabbat services, and the chapel downstairs was too small and not comfortable. So we built this. You know, there was a fundraiser. We raised a lot of money, and we built this rector chapel, which we use to this day.
Now, over the years, Philip, you've seen presidents come and go. You've been a president yourself. If you were speaking to future presidents, would there be advice that you could offer to them?
One thing I was thinking of is to sort of promote the Beth Jacob in the community, and to raise up our standing in the community, so that people would look upon Beth Jacob differently than maybe they did before, and it was to attract new members as well.
What would be the message you'd want to give to new members about Beth Jacob? Say to them, here's what we can offer. Here's why you should come here.
Well, first of all, we're completely egalitarian, and we're a friendly congregation. We welcome people. The rabbis we've had haven't been that formal, have been informal. The thing is, we're an egalitarian conservative synagogue, and that's a big selling point.